In the history of Big Brother, few seasons have sparked as much debate over jury bitterness as season 14. A season packed with twists, veteran players, dramatic blindsides ended in a jury that many fans argue was one of the most bitter the show has ever seen. But what led to this bitterness? And how did it impact the final vote? So Big Brother 14 introduced a mix of new house guests and returning veterans, including past winners like Dan Gheesling and fan favorites like Britney Hayes. With a mentor twist in place, the veterans quickly took control of the game, basically using their experience to outmaneuver the newbies. But as the game progressed, alliances were shattered, trust was broken, and blindsides blindsides became very, very normal in this season.
Think of Jenn, and they told me there's something big in this house. You're gonna have one shot to break up, and this is that shot. So Shane, I'm sorry I have to evict you.
But let's break down what made the jury so resentful and why they let their emotions get the best of them while they were voting for the winner. So the main victim of the bitter jury is obviously Dan Gheesling, who came in second place at Big Brother 14. And with this, I'm not trying to discredit Ian's win at all. Ian was actually a good player, and honestly, I'm glad Ian won. If Dan wasn't going to win regardless, I'm glad that Ian won. He was the person who deserves it as well. But you can't deny that Dan has played the best game that season, the most ruthless, cutthroat, aggressive game we've ever seen, to be honest. And he has played the best that season. His moves were legendary. Obviously, he had the funeral.
Welcome you guys all to my Big Brother funeral. But in this game, you'll never earn my trust back. You know what you did. And in this game, you're dead to me.
And then obviously, he had the biggest blind side ever of getting Shane evicted. Like, two of the biggest moves ever. But that also left a trail of bitter and angry house guests in his wake, and to be honest, he was never destined to win this. As the jury formed, it became clear that many of the evicted house guests felt betrayed, not just by Dan, but by each other, but mostly by Dan. Obviously, they had been outplayed, and they knew it too. That's the thing. But instead of respecting the gameplay, Dan's gameplay, I should say, many jurors let their personal grudges take over. Now, I'm not saying every single person was angry, but almost every single person was angry. So first we have Ashley. She knew how dangerous Dan was, and she wanted Dan to walk into that jury house next.
I hope Dan is coming in because I hope that Frank wins the $500,000. I think Dan's super dangerous, and Dan has got to get into the jury house.
Next we have Britney, who suffered the most from Dan's funeral, and that's the reason why she's evicted.
When we formed the Quack Pack, I was in it until the end. But what went down this past week really made me have to stick to my guns and fight for myself. You leaving is not personal. I have respect for you as a player in this game, and you should be proud of yourself.
But the crazy thing is, Britney wasn't actually that much bitter at all, to be honest. She actually was saying Dan got me. Like, Dan was playing a decent game, and she told people like Frank, like, Big Brother's all about lying. It's just a game.
I can't believe you fell for Dan.
He did what he had to do to get through to another week. He's played a good game.
So, like, she wasn't really bitter about it. Like, okay, she was bitter about the funeral because, you know, the whole ego thing, and she was more joking about it. But she wasn't actually mad about it like other people were. Like this next person I'm about to tell y'all. Frank. He hated Dan's game. And to be honest, I don't know if he likes Dan. I doubt he does. But he was so salty about how he got evicted.
To get through to another week.
Like, that's the thing, is that's what I'm saying, is it's dirty what he did to us.
I just think that he's played a good game. I mean,
see, I disagree.
No, he got backstabbed. Like, that was the whole thing. And he was so salty. He was arguing with Britney like, oh, like, you're not supposed to do that. And basically his logic was, I could backstab you, but you can't do that to me. Like, that's not cool. So honestly, it's stupid, to be honest. Next is Joe, Chef Joe. He was funny, but he was very, very bitter about Dan. He actually made a comment talking about how Dan will wave his Bible in the air and then he'll be stabbing you while he's waving his Bible in the air and stuff like that, which I guess it was funny, but honestly, like, you're salty as well, and is ridiculous.
He'll flap the Bible at you while he's... God didn't say stab my ass 4 times.
And we also have Jenn. I don't think she really liked Dan's gameplay either at all, to be honest. And she really said she didn't care, but you know, she definitely was a little bitter about it. Next is Shane, and honestly, I understand why he was bitter. This was one of the craziest blindsides I have ever seen in my life. Legit. Actually, I'll just show y'all it.
Jen, and they told me there's something big in this house. You're gonna have 1 shot to break up, and this is that shot. So Shane, I'm sorry I have to evict you.
And it was an amazing game move. From Dan's perspective, he had to get Shane out, but Shane didn't like it. And then once he found out, like, oh, Dan swears on the Bible and all that, that really just threw him for a loop, and it just made him bitter about Dan. And boom. And then Daneille, but she voted for Dan to win. But I think the only reason is because it was like right after she got evicted, so you know, nobody could persuade her, change her mind or anything like that. So yeah. So people like Shane, Daneille, Frank were just a few of the jurors who felt personally wronged by Dan's gameplay. Even though Daneille voted for him, she still felt wrong about him always lying to her. But they weren't just voting on who played the best game. They were voting based on who hurt them the least. This emotional decision making is a hallmark of a bitter jury. It's like, oh, I'm putting my emotions to it. That's a bitter jury. When Dan won in Big Brother 10, he got to talk to the jury house for like, I think he said like 4 hours, 5 hours. And you know, like he was telling them, vote, don't, like, set your emotions aside and vote on who you think played the best game.
Unbelievable.
Maybe you can set aside your emotions and vote to think who you played this game as a better player. And I just want to let you guys know I enjoyed getting to know all of you personally, and thanks for a great summer.
But another thing I'm about to say is Dan wasn't going to win regardless of what he did. Honestly, he could have played probably one of the cleanest games and got to the end and he still wouldn't won. You want to know why? Because the new players that were in the jury house, besides Britney, she wasn't a new player obviously, they all agreed on to vote for a person who didn't win. And you know, right there, that's just like, okay, now y'all are even more bitter about this. So the only way Dan could have possibly won this is he brought Mike Boogie to the end, but Mike Boogie wanted to take out Dan. So I'm not trying to say Ian got an easy win. Ian played one hell of a game, honestly, and Ian was like, I'm actually glad if anybody else besides Dan didn't win, which is Ian, I'm glad it was Ian that won. Even though Dan played the best that season, I'm glad Ian won. So, you know, I feel like that right there just isn't fair. It isn't fair voting. It's just really just disrespectful. Like, y'all just ruining it. Y'all are salty. Y'all don't want somebody else to win. Y'all want somebody to win 2 times. So, like, when it came time to cast their votes, the jury had to choose between Dan, who had masterminded much of the season and manipulated everybody, and Ian, the likable underdog who has also played a strong game, but he hasn't burned as much people as Dan did. The choice should have been about strategy and game plan, but for this jury, it was very, very personal. So, in a 6-1 vote, the jury handed the win to Ian, making it one of the most lopsided final votes in Big Brother history. While Ian's game was definitely not bad at all, it was a good game in my opinion, many fans agreed that Dan's gameplay was far superior, which raised questions about whether the jury actually voted on gameplay or were they just bitter at how Dan got them out of the game. The legacy of Big Brother 14 is one of controversy and debate. The bitter jury has become cautionary tale for the future players, a reminder that outplaying your opponents is only half the battle. If you burn too many bridges, you might just lose the game when it matters the most. So jury management is very important, but in this case, if even Dan tried to do a jury management, I don't think it would have worked because they didn't want a returning winner to win the game again. So my question is, was the Big Brother 14 jury too bitter? Did they make the right decision? Look, while opinions may vary, one thing is for certain: the impact of that season still resonates with fans and players alike, reminding us that in the game of Big Brother, it's not just about how you play, it's also about how you get to the end. And that's what matters the most. And that's all I gotta say to y'all. Z-Man is here. Now Z-Man is out.